an interview from Professor Ian Gordon with Professor Adrian Baddeley. Adrian will be very well known to most in the community, a Pittman medalist of the Society. And I think it's fair to say the past 3 months have been rather busy for Adrian, talking about some of the controversy around this project. So I'd like to invite Ian and Adrian, thank them for their time today, and look forward to hearing more about some of the underneath of the controversy around the Rock Art project. Thanks, Ian and Adrian.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lynn. I'd like to again acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia, and we pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders today. The Murujuga Rock Art project is studying the potential adverse effects of industrial air emissions on Indigenous rock art carvings at Murujuga, a sacred area in northern Western Australia. The site's close to large industrial projects, including Woodside's Northwest Shelf liquid natural gas facilities. So today I'm interviewing Professor Adrian Baddeley, FAA, who is the John Curtin Distinguished Emeritus Professor at Curtin University, and we, as Lynn said, we all know Adrian as an esteemed member of the international statistical community, especially for his groundbreaking work in spatial statistics and image analysis. And as Lynn mentioned, he was our Pittman medalist in 2004. So Adrian worked as the chief statistician in a large team of scientists, taking relevant measurements at the rock art site and analysing the results. And he was heavily involved in the design of the study. In May of this year, he expressed concern that there had been unacceptable government interference in the project, specifically by the use of an altered graph in the summary document arising from the full second year report. There's been some reporting of this issue by the ABC, and I'm including links to 2 articles, one from May and one from August this year, in the chat. So let me just do that now. You don't have to look at them now, but they're there for your reference if you'd like to follow it up. So there's links there to the articles and also to the full report and the summary, as I said. So here's just the start of the article back in May. So the scientist mentioned there is Adrian. And a follow-up article much more recently is this one in August, which you can again look at if you follow the link. That second article does show the 2 graphs in question. This is the relevant graph in the full report. The graph in the summary document, which is provided for general distribution, removed a green threshold line of some importance. You see that green dotted line across the bottom there? That green threshold line was removed in the summary report, as you see here. That line being the interim guideline environmental quality criterion for nitrogen dioxide based on field data. Now, the full details are you need to look at the material yourself at your leisure, but that's the gist of it. Adrian subsequently left the project. There's been further controversy recently, as reported in the very recent article, and for full disclosure, I made some comments as chair of the Stat Society Advocacy Working Group, which are reported in the second article. Now, this is an opportunity to hear from one of Australia's best and most respected statisticians regarding a difficult public controversy. We want to use the specific matter as a prompt to canvass broader issues of statisticians working in contexts where there's pressure from a client, including potentially government clients. And we hope we'll make an opportunity for questions at the end. So for the meantime, I'll just ask to make sure that you're muted. So let's start with a broader question. Those of us who teach statistical consulting are likely to use this episode as a case study when teaching ethics. What broad advice would you give to a stats student who perhaps has not yet had reason to think about pressure from clients regarding the ethics of statistical work?
Well, thank you, Ian. I'm a bit scared of becoming a case study, but I think perhaps there is a general piece of advice for students, which I think is that part of being a professional is that other people don't understand what you do. That's why you're a specialist.
Mm-hmm.
And you can expect, and you should expect, various kinds of challenges to your expertise. People may probably don't understand it. They may, doubt it, express doubt. They may resist. They may even reject your findings or your expertise. And that's a perfectly normal part of being a professional. It happens to medical GPs. It happens to airline pilots. There have been air crashes which were caused by management overruling the pilots. So this is a thing that really does have to be thought about. And I guess the piece of advice would be you're going to need to be a good communicator. Even in the best of all possible worlds, you're going to have to be good at communicating your specialist knowledge to non-specialists. And you're going to need to be professional. You need to draw lines, as I think I did, draw a red line and say this is not acceptable, but remain professional, because the strength, your authority really comes from your competence and is grounded in the profession that you're discharging. If you go off the rails and just become an unprofessional combatant, then you're not resolving anything. So you need to remain professional. You need to remain calm and professional throughout.
Thanks very much. I realise there's maybe some sensitivities because this is a sort of ongoing matter, but are you able to comment any more on the specific issue of the Rock Art project and how you've handled it?
I do need to be careful because there is a contract, and I'm still bound by elements of that contract. So there'll be things that I cannot say. But I'll just note some general features. So one thing which is quite unusual, I think, is that statistics has actually been a central issue in this whole, the whole matter of the Murujuga rock art. So there's been archaeologists and others have expressed concern about harm to the rock art for many years. There have been severe criticisms of the poor statistical methodology used in previous studies. So statistical validity has been an element in the background, and it's certainly an element now. So the contract that I mentioned specifies that the highest statistical standards, the highest international standards of statistical methodology must be used, and that there must be a chief statistician who certifies that on a piece of paper every year. So it's pretty unusual to have that kind of role and standard specifically articulated, except perhaps, I guess, clinical trials. You might see that in the US. So you can read into that the intention was to put this issue to bed once and for all by having a rather authoritative group of scientists. So the contract actually ended up involving 3 fellows of the Australian Academy of Science, which is also quite unusual, 2 statisticians, me and Noel Cressy, both involved. And it's a very large study, $30 million study, involving 6 different scientific components. And that's a lot of statistical work to do. And I guess the key point of fact that's at issue here is that in late 2023, early 2024, we've found statistically significant evidence that the rock surfaces located close to industry. Oh, hang on. Sorry, I'm running out of power. Hang on. Go on here. Sorry. Sorry, guys, I almost ran out of power there. I'm sure that's nothing to do with. That's not divine intervention or anything. Okay, so we discovered statistically significant evidence that the rock surfaces lying close to industry had increased porosity in the shallow surface, so that there was actually effectively more degradation happening to the surfaces of the rock close to industry. Now, to a scientist, that strongly suggests, it's not causative, but it strongly suggests that chronic exposure to pollution is causing degradation of the rock surface. That was duly reported in the main scientific reports. If you go and look at that, you'll see that the main report, the largest 800-page report, documents that, and that hasn't been interfered with. However, how can I put this? The final public short summary, so there's a 6-page document which is supposed to be a summary of the findings, says the opposite. So through a series of, at the very least, they're misstatements, and various other oddities, like the discrepancy you're showing here in the slides. The conclusion drawn in the summary report is that in a few rocks, some damage has been observed to have occurred in the past, and that current levels of industrial output are not causing further damage. Now, the current levels of industrial output are those black dots. The horizontal lines are thresholds which we've calculated that could be taken as the recommended levels of concern. So even if the green line is removed and you use the orange line there as a threshold, there are still some places which exceed the level of concern, and those places are the sites close to industry. So my concern was, firstly, I can't go into too many details, but firstly, the graph has been altered without our consent, or without my consent. Secondly, the message, the conclusion, has effectively been reversed or misstated at the very least. So I tried to use proper channels to discuss this. That was not successful. I emailed the clients expressing my concern at this, what I saw as interference in the scientific integrity of the project. And that started the media furor. And because the contract did not permit me to talk to the media, I then found myself in a situation where I was unable to respond to the media, unable to respond to, even to correct small errors of fact. And I want to acknowledge the support that was extended to me by the Statistical Society of Australia, the advocacy group, and the Australian Academy of Science, who are both very supportive. And that was important to me because it's a moment when you're very lonely, and a lot of people would like you to not say anything, and your conscience, your scientific conscience, is screaming at you to stick to your guns. And it's a long story. Ultimately, I felt that my position was no longer tenable, and I decided to leave. And I wish my former colleagues, the very best. They're in a very difficult situation, which I can't say much more about, I guess. So I believe that I did what I had to do under the circumstances, and I really would not have been able to sleep at night if I had not done that. So that's where we are now.
Thanks very much for that comprehensive answer, Adrian. I think amongst everything else, looking from the outside, it looks like an episode of considerable professional bravery, I would say. And it leads, you touched on this actually, but perhaps we can just finish with this question. I'll sort of merge two things together. It does raise issues about how statistical consultancy work is received, or collaboration work is received and used by the client. And this question arises, how should we respond as a profession when these situations arise? And perhaps overseas, there's organisations that take more active roles in calling out poor statistical work and the misuse of stats. But we in the Stats Society have been perhaps more reticent about that, maybe the ABS too. Should we somehow be more proactive in policing poor statistical practice and misuse of statistics? And if so, how do we do that? And among other things, who pays for that activity?
Yeah. Well, I think certainly I felt that it was important to respond promptly, because these things develop in the public sphere quickly.
Yeah.
I know that we're all, as scientists, as statisticians, we're careful to not to jump to conclusions, but a quick official response could be to express concern, and just to say, we're watching. This is a statistical issue. This is a professional issue. We're watching. We are concerned. That would be good, I think, for a society to say, and to provide some informal support to the people involved is also important. To let professionals know that they're not isolated is important, I think. Yeah. The details, when it gets down to the details, it's a bit harder to say what to do. Is it a methodological question? Is it an egregious interference? What depends what it is, I guess.
Yeah. That's going to become time-consuming, I would say.
Yeah.
At that stage.
I think also the RSS, for example, they had some bad experiences for Sally Clark. I think it took them quite a while to become active, and that was basically because of a number of scandals and miscarriages of justice. So maybe it takes being, maybe bad experiences result in more ability to do that. Yeah, I mean, this is an issue which we don't handle well, but I think it is going to keep happening, and I would say a quick response noting concern is often as effective as a more detailed response.
Thanks. The advocacy working group will take that advice on board, definitely. That's very useful. All right. So we did say that we'd allow some time for general questions, and I'd like it if you could do that in an orderly way. So perhaps if people can raise their hands on Zoom or just literally on the camera, if I can see them, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask Adrian.
John Henstridge has a question here.
Sorry, I didn't see that. John? Yeah, go ahead. You need to unmute. Yeah.
Right. Firstly, I'd just like to thank Adrian for shall we say, bearing it all in a public forum like this. It's not an easy process to go through. What I would just like to say is that I've been involved with some of this since about 2016, but the data collection process about monitoring this thing goes back about 12 years before that. And there have been statistical issues during all of this time there. And if you look up a Senate committee hearing back in about 2017, you will find lots of documents associated with that, including probably some of mine there. And and it was divisive back then, back in 2017, and it is unfortunately divisive still. I think it was one of my recommendations, or informal recommendations, that led to the contract that Adrian had, saying I needed to have a chief statistician involved there. And I suppose what I would just like to say is that it's really unfortunate that it's got to a stage where the chief statistician has to take a stand like this. And I think it's something where the society should be accepting him, supporting him very strongly in that. I don't really have a question. That's a statement rather than a set of questions. But I think the context of here with problematic statistics goes back a long way.
Yeah, I'll take that as a comment, as they say on Q&A. Nick, do you have a question?
No, I've also got a comment.
Well,
Greetings, Adrian. Shades of 1986.
Oh.
Sorry, a slightly in joke. My comment is twofold comments. Firstly, I'm delighted that the Stat Society is now starting to be prepared to go public in terms of advocacy of commenting on social issues, because Dennis Truan and I made strenuous efforts a few years ago to get it to start doing this, and this was rejected, particularly in relation to COVID. And secondly, an initiative I've been pushing for many years, again, more recently with Adrian's help, and also with Dennis Truan's help and Adrian Badley's and people getting confused. Noel Cressy's help is to try to get the position of chief data scientist established parallel to the position of chief scientist in Australia. This is proving very difficult to do, but I haven't given up yet. And I think there is absolutely compelling evidence that we need such a person who can communicate directly with very senior levels in the federal government and be consulted on matters like this and give an opinion at a very high level. I think I congratulate you, Adrian, on what you've achieved so far. I've known about this project a long time through John Black. Courage, mon vieux.
thank you, Nick. Adrian, do you have a question? Adrian Barnett, that is.
Yes.
The other Adrian B.
Yeah, I'll start with a comment just to say I've had 3 instances of suppression from Australian government agencies myself. Every time I feel like I lost. I feel like I could definitely sleep at night personally, but I think the Australian public lost out on true information that was potentially embarrassing to an agency. Now my question, in the meta research world, which I've drifted into, some people, when they point out fraud, have been threatened to be sued. There's a famous case from some Harvard researchers who ironically were working in honesty and being potentially very dishonest by the looks of it. The reaction to that was the meta research community, who obviously have some wealthy friends, set up a fund to help people if there's a legal case. Now I know, and I'm sure you know this, Ian, going to court is probably the last thing you want to do. But I wonder if Adrian wants to comment, and imagine if we had a similar thing here, if there was some kind of safety net where, you described that feeling of being very alone, but if you knew there was this safety net of possibly, a couple of $1 million sitting there that you could apply to get legal advice.
I hadn't thought about that. I think that, this particular experience of mine raises issues about the public administration of scientific research when a government commissions independent research, what processes make sure that it's really independent. So I think of it as I wouldn't call it corruption, but poor governance, concerns about public administration, and I guess what I hope to rely on is the public's sense of fairness, concern about maladministration, maybe parliamentary oversight, maybe four corners, who knows.
Mm-hmm.
So I think of it, I guess I have been thinking of it more as so I think it's a question of public interest. So if I were ever to be maybe prosecuted for some claimed violation of contract or whatever, my defence, at least my moral defence, would be I think it's in the public interest. And it's in the public interest because it's about the public administration of and the integrity of research. But yeah, there is no, I can't help reflecting that, editing a graph and misstating a conclusion, if that were done by a scientist and submitted to a scientific journal, that would be a career-ending case of fraud or something like it. Whereas there's no penalty whatsoever for spinning a scientific report in public affairs. So that I think we're all instinctively, by our training, rebel against this common practice in the public sphere. I think that's the main issue.
Yeah. Thanks, Adrian. Daisy Evans has made this very sobering remark, I think, in the chat, which I'll let you read. We'll finish with one more question from Peter Ellis.
Yeah, g'day, thanks. And thanks, Adrian, for sharing the experience. My question is about the support that you found helpful from the SSA. And I'm thinking about, if we as an association want to do, a society want to do more of this sort of thing, this case is a relatively straightforward one, right? In that there only seems to be you on the statistician side. The government hasn't wheeled out a rival statistician who's criticising your modelling or something. So it's relatively easy for us to decide who to support. There's no sort of debate going on here. And a lot of time we will find it is a more complex situation like that, where maybe most of us think that the person in your position is doing it right. The government's wheeled out some hack to say, make up a system with doing whatever questionable things for something else. That's much harder for us as a society to speak out publicly there. And so I'm just wondering, can't speculate too much, but what was really helpful for you? Was it having some experienced people who've gone through these sorts of things before, just be there for you to talk it through? Or what else would have been helpful? And particularly if it was a much messier situation, what would be really helpful for the SSA to provide? Thank you.
I think it's more, people can make mistakes, of course, and there are always opinions about whether you should use, p-values or Bayesian methods or whatever. And that's perfectly valid, and that's within the professional sphere. I guess the other aspect which makes this difficult is that there was a contract, and specifically the contract forbade me from talking to anyone. So that was more likely to make me isolated, and that's probably the design of the contract. Expressions of support, simply to identify, even if there are competing sides, if you simply identify these are professionals, they're entitled to form professional opinions and to and there shouldn't be negative consequences for that. So there are some things I can't say, but I certainly appreciated being approached by professional bodies, the Statistical Society of Australia and the Australian Academy of Science both approached me. Given that there was a contract binding me not to talk, it wasn't really possible to do much with that, other than, I guess it was the fact that the societies also communicated to my employer, at least, and I think they may also have communicated to the clients and said, we are concerned about this. So even if a professional society simply expresses concern, that draws attention to the fact that this is not just some troublesome, egghead who's got a different view. This is a matter of professional integrity. And people, I do think that some of the government people may have been quite surprised to realise that this was a matter of professional integrity. And simply having been told, well, this is a matter of concern to the society, was actually a pretty influential thing to do.
And
so,
of course, it may be a matter, sorry.
Yeah.
I was just going to say it may be a matter of judgment, but given the course of events now, it's drawn a lot more attention probably to the report and so on, and might have been the case if it had been reported as summarised more consistently with the full report.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the intention of the project is to put this matter to rest, to get rid of the question marks about poor statistical methodology in the past and other matters. And this has certainly not been put to rest.
Yeah. I'm conscious of the time, so I see there's another question in the chat, but I think we need to conclude now. We said we'd keep to time. So thank you very much, Adrian, for giving us your time and valuable insight into this controversy. It's really appreciated, and we wish you all the best, whatever connection you may have with it in the future. And I'll just briefly hand back to Lynn.
Thanks, Ian. Thank you both very much for your comments today, for your leadership in this area. And I think some of the themes that you talked about, Adrian, in terms of communication, calmness, professionalism and integrity for our younger members and our early career statisticians, when they might find themselves in similarly, hopefully less high profile circumstances, that some of your strength will help them to realise that they are acting as we hope they can, and that they've got the backing of their professional body. So thank you everyone for all of the work underlying the AGMs today. I hope you found that a stimulating session. I certainly have. And I really thank everyone for their time in joining us and wish you the best for the afternoon.